You're having a nice time. I'm back with another small learning on my side, and I hope it is helpful for you too. Picking up from our last experiment, where we installed the open source Otari framework, today we will continue to connect it with an LLM adapter, which in our case will be Ollama. As you can see from the flow diagram, when we install a Docker container based on the Otari instance, it gives us an OpenAI compatible request response API endpoint. This endpoint is available at localhost 8000/viewer, but if we try to invoke it with a call request, it will fail since we have not yet explicitly connected it with any LLM adapters. As we understand, Otari acts as a control plane proxy before a request lands with the LLM adapter. So the first goal is to install Ollama and download a small large language model. We'll visit ollama.com, download, and copy the command to install Ollama. And this everyone can follow. It's a simple Google step there. Now, here as you can see, I have Ollama set up and I'll try to run it with a particular model, which in our case would be Gemma 3 with 270 million model. So I've already downloaded it, but if you run it and if it's not downloaded already, it will download it. So it's basically set up. I'll exit this interface. When you install Ollama, it also gives you a open AI compatible endpoint. So our goal is to update the Ollama LLM API in Otari so that when we make a request to Otari control plane, it then proxies the request to Ollama large language model. Our goal is now to replace the OpenAI based URL endpoint with the Ollama compatible endpoint. What I will do here is I will show you one step which we missed in the previous experiment was that we needed to copy an Otari API key which authenticates all the requests which go through it. This is a one-time API key which the container shows or logs it when we start it up. So if you have already started the container previously, you'll need to delete the volume through this command because it's stored in the database. What I will do now is I'll start the services, and I've also put a Ollama container inside the Docker Compose file. I'll show the contents of it. So as you can see, I've also put a Ollama container service because since Otari would now need to connect to the Ollama model, which Ollama is now present in my host rather than inside the Docker container service. To keep it simple and also independent for anyone testing this, one just needs to add this content, and Ollama is now present as a container service for you. Now let's see we have three services up. Here we will now try to see the logs of the Otari service, and as you can see it gives us one key here. This is a one time, so that if you start it again after this you won't be able to see it. So it's better to copy it somewhere secure for later reference. This value will need to be updated in the env file through creation of a environment variable called Otari API key. I will show later as to where this is used exactly. In order to create this environment variable, when you had previously cloned the Otari repository, it provided with a example env file. In your case, we will need to copy this and then to a file called .env and then create that new environment variable towards the end of the file. That should do the task. Now with this setup, if you see we have the large language model Ollama, but the connection from Otari to LLM model is still not established at this point. In order to do that, we will need a few changes and that will be in the config.yaml file. The first one is you will find a section called OpenAI, and here you will also see when you build this file a default value for API key. That is if you're connecting to the actual OpenAI endpoint. But in our case, the Ollama adapter provides us with its own API. So we will just need to replace the API base URL here with this endpoint as we checked previously, which is the Ollama endpoint. And the API key for Ollama is empty. So we are keeping it empty in this case. That's one change, which allows Otari now to connect to the Ollama adapter API. The second change which we will need is whenever a request goes through Otari to an adapter model or API endpoint, Otari already establishes a pricing model. Let's see this as to where it does this. So here we are also establishing Ollama API base so that it's useful for Otari. And here as you see, the pricing model is established for different models, let's say Vertex AI, OpenAI. In our case, we are putting it for Ollama version Gemma 270 million model. And the input price per million is zero point 0.0 at this moment. So we have just put some default value just to get started. But when you deploy this in a production environment, you definitely want some cost to establish if you are kind of establishing, let's say, a product where you're providing different models, but you have your own pricing model which you want to charge different tenants for. So this is necessary in our case. Okay, so these two changes, an API base and a pricing model. Once you are done with this, just restart the service once more, particularly the Otari one. So Docker compose restart Otari. Now with this, we have established the connection. So we have the LLM model endpoint, which is Ollama in our case, um, and this is now established. We have now a connection established too. Now our goal is to execute a request to the Otari endpoint here. So let's try this into effect. What I've done is created a simple file here. If you see, it uses the Otari API key which we had defined on the .env file, and this is a base URL. And just to give you an idea, Otari also exposes a similar OpenAI compatible request response API. So we are using the OpenAI library and using the model for Ollama just to make sure that the model for Ollama is used, and then say a simple hello to it. And then we dump out the output from Otari, which eventually gets the response from the large language model hosted in Ollama. So now we will run uv run main.py. Um, Let me see. Okay, this is the command we want to run so that we are also able to see the output in detail. Now, as we can see here, we got the output. It's very similar to the response model of OpenAI format. And you can see, hello, how can I help you today? That's the response we get. But along with this, we also get an additional response from Otari, which says that it acts as a proxy layer. It says the completion tokens is 12, the prompt tokens is 11, total tokens used is 23. So this is where now we are able to integrate the control plane with an adapter. An adapter, a large language model adapter API could be any one of OpenAI, Anthropic, and others. But we took the Ollama model so that anyone can install it free in their service here. One last point I wanted to share is in the Docker Compose YAML, the service for Ollama here uses a CPU one, but if you want a GPU, just Google it out. There's just one parameter, I think, relevant to GPU, which allows the container to use your GPU if it's already available in your environment. So this is what I wanted to showcase today. And we'll learn more in the coming sessions as to how to extend from this learning. Hope this was helpful.